Elisa. I work for Live DMA. We are a European network for live music associations representing over 3,000 venues, clubs, and festivals in Europe. And what really interested us in this Amplify Music Conference was the whole question you said, that how can we learn from other local communities creating resilience under COVID-19? And this is why we wanted to present this panel that we called Advocacy Approaches from Europe. So this session aims to really bring forward best practice and inspiration to help others from the live music sector to take action, and especially for those live music scenes and countries and regions who have not yet an association or organization to represent them and defend the venue's interests. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you to our three speakers for the sessions, three Live DMA members. We have Anya della Croce, who's the co-coordinator from Petzi, Associations of Not-for-Profit Live Music Venues in Switzerland. So hi, Anya.
Hello.
And we also have Davyd, who is the CEO of Music Venue Trust, the grassroots venues NGO in the UK. Hello, Mark. Sorry. And we have also with us Esben, who is the CEO of Dansk Live, the Danish Live Music Association, representing venues and festivals. Good morning.
Hello,
Esben.
good morning. Good morning here after.
Yeah. So let's swing right into the conversation. And well, we all know that venues and clubs are forced into standstill mode right now due to the COVID-19 situation, and which has dramatic effects on the venues. Their economic situation is already quite fragile in a normal situation, and as they really depend on the revenues generated by audience expenses, they now struggle to survive and are under enormous pressure and fear for their existence. And your associations acted very quickly and ended directly in contact with your governments and partners to defend the venues and to help them float through this crisis. And I would just like to ask you now on how you did this. How did you first approach the situation in your countries? And I'd like to give the word to Anya first.
Well, thanks, Elisa. Switzerland has been the second country in Europe after Italy to ban events, and they started on February 28th to ban events over 1,000 people. I remember sending it to all of you guys an email to say that, and everybody reacted pretty heavily, like, "Oh wow, this is a big decision." And it was pretty interesting to see during the next week how every country actually started to be even more restrictive. We had the chance between February 28th and March 13, when the complete ban was announced by a government, to be part of the discussion with the government, which was a very interesting point for us, because somehow it was also an opportunity to explain to them how the entire ecosystem works, because I think they weren't aware of all the specificities of our industry. So this was a good thing for us to be able to go to them and talk to them. We are still in the discussion because at the moment the government still hasn't made any decision for the summer, which is a big issue for our members, our festival members, because they do need an official ban to be able to apply the force majeure, act of God. So this is what we're working on. But yeah, we've been working actively every day towards our government. And also Switzerland is a federation, it's a confederation, so it's a lot on the regions to make decisions. So this is what's sometimes complicated for us, is we have to talk on a national level, but mostly on a regional level, and it's 26 regions, and it's not a lot of us in the office. So yeah, we're pretty busy with this.
Okay. Esben, how did you work on what were your first actions in Denmark?
The first just to tap in on Anya's time frame, we had the first encouragement to not do events with more than 1,000 participants at March 6th. And we went directly to the press, more or less, because we realized that the encouragement alone wasn't enough for the organizers at the venues at that point to to cancel the shows. They would need the clear ban. So we luckily actually we went to the press, and I had a day. Denmark is a relatively small country, so I was in the like one channel on the news and in the radio directly after that, and coincidentally sat in the newsroom and spoke to some of the journalists, and that was really helpful in this situation, because we realized we needed to put our lawyer into work, and she went in the press and said that we would more or less sue the government on this. It was quite a strict move in a way, but it really helped us open the discussion with the politicians because they realized, as Anya also said, they didn't really understand how things work actually. So that worked a lot. Then 5 days later, we had the ban for all plus 1,000 events, and of course that was like a bad news, but then again, better than just an encouragement. And a couple of days later, a week or so later, all events were banned. So at the moment it's plus 10. And the country is slowly opening. The schools are open, the kindergartens are open, but just 2 weeks ago we had the announcement that all festivals, larger events, as it's told, because it's also sporting events, of course, would be banned for the whole summer until end of August. And we've been trying to have a clear statement on how many people are attending a larger event, and at the moment it's 500. But it's quite complicated because they are slowly reopening, but the limit is 500. So it might be 100 in early May and building from that. So it's really quite. It's not clear yet, but we've used all the momentum we gained in the beginning to have talks with all the politicians and a lot of media, of course, and we really succeeded well in having support packages, as it's called in Denmark, funding for this crisis, for the venues and for the festivals as well. At the moment, it's not quite clear how it works, but there is a system of funding. We need to find out what the politicians agreed on, and at the moment they're not quite sure what they agreed on. So that's quite complicated. This, you need to understand that Denmark is we have high taxes, we have a healthy support system for the venues as it is, and all of these fundings are not only applying for venues and festivals, they're applying for all sorts of institutions, museums, theaters, and also sporting events. And this is a lot of support going to people out of job and companies that need to cut down in expenses. They are able to get some funding as well. So there's a lot of heavy investment going on in Denmark at the moment, and with just a small part of that really. So it's not it's not our accomplishment alone.
Okay. So thanks for.
And I forgot to record. Sorry.
Thanks for the insight. Mark, I know that in the UK, the situation was quite, difficult at the beginning, as there were no clear indications coming from the government. What rang the alarm bell for you to take action?
Well, the downturn in business really started last week of February, so the week beginning 24th, and from the 2nd of March, there were a large number of no-shows, which in the particular economics of our system is very, very difficult, because although somebody may not reclaim their ticket, they're not spending any money at the bar, and 65% of the money in our sector comes from sales of wet sales. So basically, we started surveying the venues and tracking what was happening. We represented 680 venues. We started tracking what was happening. We published our first report on the 9th of March, and there was a little bit of tension between different types of venues and different models of what they were putting on, in that Some people desperately wanted to stay open because that's the only way they could see to continue to pay people. And other people desperately wanted to be closed because they knew that the public was turning against the events. So the government did not handle the closure very well. It would be an understatement. The Prime Minister stood up on the 16th of March and said that all pubs and bars should stay open, but that nobody should go to them, which was a bizarre position. At that point, we worked over the next 24 hours on an immediate report of the financial impact of that and illustrated the government with a report we delivered to them 24 hours later that that statement would result in approximately 640 venues being permanently closed within the space of the next 10 days. In response to that, they finally issued a notice to close on the 20th of March. Again, rather ineptly, to be honest, issued a thing saying they probably should be closed tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, provoking a complete abandonment of venues that evening. So people were playing in front of completely empty rooms. And then since then, I'm going to go back to something that Elisa said right at the top, which is very important to understand. The number of trading venues in the UK had been decreasing every year for 16 years. We had lost approximately 37% in total of all the venues that were open to trade across that period. And in 2019, we hold an annual event, as I think you all know, called Venues Day. And our October 2019 Venues Day, it was the first year in 16 years that I was able to stand up and say, there will be more venues trading in the UK than there were at the beginning of the year, by January 2020. So then it's obviously quite a blow to now be looking at an extremely serious situation. And I think, again, something that Elisa picked up on, this is a very, very specialized economic model, incredibly specialized. And what we're finding is that although there are now actions from government, very frequently the safety net that they've created that's meant to catch small businesses like music venues fall through the cracks. They neither have lots of employees, which the government has done something on, nor do they have self-employed people. They're quite often the owners of their not the owners of their own buildings, so they're tenants, but there's been no action on rents. So effectively, we're still in pretty much the same position. Thankfully, we're now getting the support of artists. We have one particular artist, Frank Turner, who's trying to save the venues one by one, and has so far saved 5, I think it is now. So our number that are under threat, out of our 680 members, we now have 552 that are under immediate permanent threat of closure within the next 8 weeks. So we're announcing plans about what to do with that.
Okay. And so, Mark, what I'd like to ask you also is that I know that Music Venue Trust, so you worked on the policy side of things towards the governments, but you're also really reached out to your partners and to other actors from the music industry to work together on this. Maybe can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, on the policy side, we have I lead a kind of policy team. We one of the things I can definitely advocate for in this is don't pay any attention to any press conferences. Press conferences are rolling statements that the government makes in order to get headlines. Wait for the actual detail to come out and then analyze that. Whatever is said in a press conference in the UK, I don't know about elsewhere, is not frankly worth listening to. In fact, we've stopped listening to them because they're not worth listening to. They claimed that 95% of self-employed people would be covered by a new self-employed scheme. It's actually 42%. So that range of inaccuracy isn't helpful. What we're doing is every time they do announce a new policy, we take it apart based on, luckily, when we came into live DMA, we met Arne quite early on from the Netherlands, and the surveys that we did in 2017, 2018, 2019 built on the Netherlands model and on the live DMA stats. We are now able to model every single policy that's announced by government within about 48 hours, send them a direct report to all different departments. So we send one to Treasury, one to Culture, one to Communities and Local Government, and we say, this part will work, that part will not work, this part, well, this number of people own their buildings, so that bit's useful, this number of people don't. And every time, the most solid thing we do with government is we just tell them the physical number of how much this is actually going to cost us as opposed to how much they announced in the press conference. Then on the other side, you mentioned we do have very strong partnerships with Live Nation, believe it or not, Ticketmaster, all the Evil Empire members, AEG, everybody you can think of that we normally say bad things about. So we have very strong partnerships with them. We launched, our process is we realized that the problem we have is too big. We can't save all 550 plus venues at once. What we already had was an emergency response team that tackles the individual closure of a venue. We've escalated that to a crisis team that is trying to tackle 550 plus individual cases. We have a lawyer, a rent negotiator, we have a licensing specialist. I mean, there's lots and lots of detail on this, but effectively what we've done is we launched our own appeal for £1 million to pay for that team to respond to 550 individual cases. And then on Monday, we're launching our Save Our Venues campaign, which is an appeal for artists to adopt a venue and basically hold virtual gigs and do merch and everything to raise the specific amount of money that that venue needs. And most venues are going for somewhere between a £20,000 and £30,000 target. So if you add that money up, that would actually come to, if everybody got 30,000, it'd be 15 million. That is in the ballpark of the amount of money we need.
So I think it's really amazing what you're doing to having also this really holistic approach on the music ecosystem and how you integrate the venues as like the like we often say it's like the research and development department of the live music, the music sector in general. So I think that you're completely right, involving the whole industry in your action. And
just to pick up on one point you just made there, Elisa, that's actually our next piece of work, is that we are now attacking the research and development grants in the UK, the tax incentives, because we are saying that they currently exclude culture as a research and development element. So we're going to ask for that to be changed as part of the government response. Okay, looking forward to follow this then. Anya, I would like to ask you how you work with other actors on the in the music ecosystem in Switzerland. You also work quite close with partners, do you?
Yeah, we are, of course. I think, as Mark just said, it's too big of a problem to just work on this alone, and you can't do anything alone in this situation. So we've also, well, we have like one other specificity of Switzerland is we have different languages. So we have a task force that's been active in the cultural sector, including theaters, dance institution, and other partners. That's been pretty active up to the national government. And we also started a task force in the French-speaking part, including artist association, us, of course, some booking agent as well, because they are very, very hardly hit by all of this as well. And yeah, we've been working together to try to have common statements, even if it's not always easy, because we don't have the same interest. And of course, like we all want some money, but it's always difficult to define who's going to get what. If I can say something else, we are very lucky in Switzerland because there is money in our country. So the fact that we could actually go to the government pretty early and explain to them that we would need money for the venues, for the clubs, for the festivals, for the artists, for the entire industry, they actually announced pretty quickly that they would give 280 million funds for culture, which is pretty interesting for us. It's pretty big, and that's only for the 2 first months. So this fund is running until May 15th. So now we are in the process of trying to explain to our members what they can ask for in that fund. But the fund is now separated in different regions. So again, it's a regional question. And the other thing that's very important that Mark said as well is the data. I was watching one of the sessions last night, and someone was saying that if you want to advocate, you need data. And I think that really helped us because we've been doing this for many years now. So we were able really quickly to come up to the authorities to say, okay, this is going to cost that amount of money per week just for our members. So this is also a very, very strong tool to be able to trying to get what we need. And the last thing we did with Petzi is we also have a ticketing service for our members. So we set up a Petzi community fund, we called it. So there was 2 ways of participating. People could actually leave the tickets that they bought for the events and say, we don't want to be reimbursed. We just want to leave the money to the venue. Or if they didn't want to, you know, just give the entire amount, they can actually contribute to this fund. There's one fund that's a community fund for all our members, and it's going to be redistributed to the ones that need the most urgently some money to survive, and members can also set up their own fund. But yes, we need to work all together, and this is kind of the difficult part, but it's pretty interesting to show that we are able to work all together.
My mic, okay. And so I think that we need data to do good advocacy work is something that we've been doing at LiveDMA, that we've promoting at LiveDMA for a couple of years now. And I would like to ask Esben how you work with the data in this situation, and what would be your best piece of advice on this?
We more or less did the same as Mark and Anya describes. We tapped into like showing the politicians what amount of money goes through the festivals. In Denmark, we've had quite good funding systems for the venues from the beginning, actually, because it's all a part of all the cultural institutions, the museums, and so on. So the bigger ones suffer quite hard because they normally have like big ticketing and a lot of beer sales. So we're working on that. But for the smaller ones, it's been not easy, but better than for the bigger ones. And we've mainly focused on securing some help for the festivals, and it really helped. We've been doing together with the rights management, the Danish rights management agency, a statistics on the festivals for the last 5 years, and that really helped us in this, because we have all the numbers, as Mark also said, just using old numbers and showing the politicians what amount of money it is we're losing. That really helps. And actually the amount that we put in for the festivals, close to 2 billion Danish kroner, is more or less like the official number that they use when speaking of the festivals. So that's quite good. And it really, we succeeded with like good numbers, solid work, well-documented numbers, as the trade unions for the musicians, who are also quite strong in Danish context, had like 2 big numbers and didn't know, like it was just one big chaotic thing. There's 2 of them. And the politicians all said to us, wow, this is really good work. This is very solid. Actually, the Minister of Culture called me and said, wow, you're really doing a good job. Keep it coming. So just focused on that. And I know in like times of crisis and panic and busy times, it's difficult, but it's really important not to overstretch your numbers and just be I don't know. Be correct, I guess, is the word I'm searching for.
Yeah, I know that we have only a couple of minutes left, and I'd just like to ask a last question. Maybe only one of you will be able to answer. Like, you all said that there are emergency funds and emergency support mechanisms in your country, and the word emergency is what I'm looking at. That the measures put into place right now are for a short time period, and like venues and clubs were amongst the first who had to close and might be the last to reopen. So Mark, maybe you would like to say something on what do you think on will be the challenges for the next 6, 12 and 18 months to come?
Well, on the reopening thing, we're working on a pan-international project called REVS, Reopen Every Venue Safely, which we're also working with Washington University on. And basically that is a 4-stage program dealing with public health, the economic reality of perhaps limited capacity, and how we would achieve social distancing, and very importantly, how we might do things both in the physical but also in the virtual in order to make them economically viable. So if we're going to be limited down to maybe 100 people that are allowed in the room, how can we have maybe 500 or 1,000 attending, but we also need to manage that for the value of the artists. So what we need to do is guard against 100,000 people watching online, which is the only gig that artist can play in the next 5 years. so we need to control that quite carefully. So that's what we're working on. Can I just say another thing on the advocacy? The other role I think all our organizations have played is interpreting government advice and then advocating what people can get. So that's a really important role that an organization like ours plays. A lot of the information that came from government was completely incomprehensible. We had to take it apart and put it back together in plain speaking language. You are entitled to this if you are structured this way or if you have this problem. And if you go to our website, you'll be able to see out on a front page, we have taken all the government advice and broken it down into easily understandable things.
Wow, it is so encouraging to hear all of these approaches you all have taken, and involving Frank Turner, getting the data right, and involving the press, and taking these various approaches to solving the problem. I want to ask one last. We've got a couple of minutes, and first of all, we had a comment in the chat room. I think it was Kat from Italy mentioned, it's not a question necessarily, but the situation for festivals and venues is very critical. We still don't have any decision taken from the government in terms of allowing events for the summer. Are y'all in the same boat? You don't have any idea of when
Same here.
This is going to be over, or any leniency is going to be given?
It's the same in Switzerland. For now, we're waiting on a decision that's supposed to come next Wednesday. But what we did about the festival is we wrote a letter to the government to explain to them that if there's nothing happening in Germany and Belgium, I mean, it's going to be complicated for the artists to maintain their tour anyway. So basically, we want them to forbid, but we can't ask them that because it's against what we represent. But we want to make them aware of the different parameters they need to consider making a decision. So it's a good decision, and our government is not like in the UK. I mean, I think they're trying to make the best decision they can. So we're hopeful with this, but we're pretty sure that it's not going to happen. The biggest festival already cancelled anyway.
Well, who knows? And if I knew, I'd be rich. But hey, it is so encouraging to hear what you all are doing, and you're fighting the good fight for your countries in the midst of all this. And we appreciate not only what you're doing out there and Live DMA is doing, but we thank you for being here and sharing what you've got going. And